Did you know that the human foreskin performs over 16 unique functions? Most notably, it is a natural lubricant, providing gliding and rolling action, making sex much more comfortable and convenient for both him and his partner. It also contains over 10,000 specialized nerve endings, making sex much more pleasurable and satisfying for both him and his partner. And the prepuce, that's a scientific name, the prepuce is just a protective covering, just like your eyelid protects your eye. And so it protects glands from getting less sensitive over time. Now, the movement I want to bring to you today is known as intactivism. It's a civil rights movement started by a bunch of men who were circumcised as infants, so they didn't get a choice whether they wanted their bodies to be permanently altered or not. Now they're trying to regrow their foreskins. There are many stretching devices you can buy on the internet, or some people opt for surgery like skin grafting does, restore the foreskin, the prepuce. Of course, a man-made prepuce is never quite as good as the one you're born with, so it would have been a lot quicker and cheaper just to not force cosmetic amputation onto an infant in the first place. So now those men are complaining that routine infant genital mutilation are recognized for what it is, a very serious human rights violation. Now, I am well aware that some religious or cultural groups, such as Judaism and Islam, recognize circumcision as a necessary rite of passage for men to enter covenant with God. And what I have to say to that is, actually, after having done my own research, I've discovered that the original form of circumcision, which was performed prior to 500 AD during the Old Testament, actually, the original circumcision, which was done by Abraham, all that was a very small, non-invasive little prick of the prepuce, designed to draw just a single drop of blood. And of course, that would heal and you'd still have a healthy, fully functional foreskin, but apparently, over the centuries, circumcision has become so much more distorted, or other things added to it by other groups, that the modern form of circumcision, which is commonly performed by doctors, rabbis, and royals today, is completely eliminating an entire sensory organ. I'm pretty sure it's modeled after the ancient Egyptian, torture method for slave owners. So slave owners would use the modern form of circumcision on their slaves in order to psychologically dominate their slaves. Sounds pretty archaic and barbaric to me. After all, if God is all-powerful, why would a divine creator have humans consistently born with a body part we're just supposed to chop off right after birth? That doesn't really make sense. I mean, the Old Testament was written a long time ago when the world was very, very different than how it is today. Like, back then, they didn't have indoor plumbing, they couldn't take showers, so I'm willing to bet a lot of money that over the centuries there must have been some things that were just mistranslated, misinterpreted, exaggerated, or just aren't relevant in the 21st century. I mean, the Torah does have a does strictly prohibit all forms of alteration of the human body, so, I mean, circumcision is a permanent body modification like any other, actually is it's a permanent body modification that does alter the functioning of a body part. I know a lot of Jews who, despite being pro-circumcision, they would never force the Jewish covenant onto their children, because they believe the circumcision is so important or so serious that it should only be done to a person who agrees that they want it to be performed on them. And also, if we say we want to live in a civilized, rational society without things like anti-Semitism or sexism, routine infant child mutilation just doesn't sound like something rational or civilized people do. Yes, this barbaric practice, the circumcision thing, which is commonly performed on non-Jews, actually, which, yeah, infants are subject to it, so it's done to them against their will. And then they grow up and they become really angry about it because it is not even biblically accurate at all. And it's incredibly harmful and it's very unfair. So, that does promote anti-Semitism and, yeah, people get very angry and it does cause mental problems. So, I don't really get why we continue to do that. That's really pretty stupid. I'm also aware that some medical institutions may claim that there are potential health benefits of being circumcised, and those include and are limited to reduced risk of penile cancer, reduced risk of STDs, and reduced risk of UTIs. While it is true that amputating a piece of healthy, functional tissue does decrease one's risk of developing cancer, it's also true that removing one of your kidneys would reduce your risk of cancer. And breast cancer is actually much more common than penile cancer among both males and females. But I've never heard of parents removing their child's breast tissue. So, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. You could also chop off one of your ears and have a much lower risk of inner ear infection. Or you could just practice proper hygiene, not stick foreign objects in there. Actually, in Europe, with the lowest rate of circumcision, they also have the lowest rate of STDs and UTIs. And then in the United States, we have the highest rate of circumcision among developed nations. And we also have the highest rate of circumcision or the highest rate of STDs and UTIs among developed nations. So, whatever potential supposed health benefits that may exist, don't seem to be working. Now, countries where circumcision is extremely rare, if not completely illegal, because those societies have recognized circumcision for what it is an extremely barbaric, backwards, antiquated, archaic, extremely insensitive, thoughtless, senseless, incredibly harmful, disgustingly cruel human rights violation that should only ever be resorted to in the most extreme absolute medical necessities, with a prior diagnosis, of course, with the patient's prior well-informed consent, of course. Those countries include, but are not limited to, China, India, Japan, Thailand, Hong Kong, Russia, Ukraine, all of Scandinavia, Belgium, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Greece, Italy, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Now, an honest doctor will tell you that. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the developed nations that still hold where the majority of the populace still hold this false belief that the human male foreskin is just a nuisance that should be discarded from the body, and yeah, the blood ritual of circumcision somehow accomplishes something like beneficial. Those countries include and are limited to the United States, Israel, and South Korea. South Korea, by the way, only hopped on this bandwagon of absolute lunacy during the Korean War, when the U.S. military spread hearsay. In all of those countries, this barbaric, antiquated practice is in rapid decline because people are starting to realize it doesn't really do anything beneficial, and it causes a lot of problems. It has many consequences. So an honest doctor will tell you that while there may be some potential health benefits, maybe, well, actually, no, there aren't. It's all completely made up by the medical industry to try to justify the sexual assault of infants and keep this multi-million-dollar industry going. The honest doctor will tell you that the risks or consequences of circumcision include but are not limited to redness, irritation. Yeah, some men are actually kept in constant pain after this incredibly harmful, disgusting cruel, completely unnecessary, sorry, excuse for a medical procedure. There's also risk of hemorrhaging, skin tags, dryness, chafing, excessive blood loss. Actually, 1 out of every 77 circumcised infants does end up dying as a result of this incredibly harmful, disgusting, cruel, complete, unnecessary, sorry, excuse for medical procedure. So, just from that alone, like the fact that there are actually people dying from this or people losing their newborn sons, it's like, wow, we don't do foot binding anymore, but this sounds really, really bad. And another consequence is reduced sensitivity. Actually, men who are circumcised as adults say there's always about a 95% loss of sensitivity. So it is an attack on someone's sexuality. And another consequence is mental illness. And if you're wondering, how does circumcision cause mental illness? Well, just imagine you wake up one day and your forelimbs are all held down with restraints. There's a gag in your mouth, so you can't talk. Your genitals are exposed, and some strange person who you've never seen before comes at you with a sharp object. Wouldn't that be pretty scary? Pretty traumatic? And to make matters worse, your whole family's there, and they're all really excited to see you being mutilated. And while the victim is screaming out in pain, everyone just watching intently as if they're just watching a baseball game or a soccer match. And when the victim actually does stop crying out in pain, brain scans show that that person has now become less uncomfortable. So the cortisol levels in their brain have not subsided. That person has actually become so uncomfortable with the current situation that, well, there are two possibilities. They've either passed out from the blood loss, or that person has entered a state of shock. So they're now so uncomfortable that their brain can no longer perceive reality. So wow, shock is a very severe mental state that only the most unfortunate members of humanity ever have to experience in the most extremely traumatic cases of life. So, I think forcing all that unnecessary pain and suffering onto an infant, if that is diabolical, I don't know what is. Now, I hope this presentation has made you think more about how your decisions can have an impact on the lives of others, and I hope that now you will consider abolishing this absolute insanity known as routine infant genital mutilation. Thank you.